I'm Allison, and this is Dream Anyway, a podcast for those of us who feel the pull to create, even when the path isn't clear. So wherever you are in your journey, grab a coffee, get comfy, and dream anyway.
I'm Karen Mobley.
Hello, Karen Mobley. What do you do?
So I do many things. I'm a visual artist. I am a writer of poems, stories, interpretive signs, magazine articles. I'm an art consultant, and I do contract work for Spokane Arts, the state of Washington through Artois. Sometimes I do project management for engineering and architecture firms. Sometimes I teach classes at the art school. Sometimes I'm an adjunct professor. Sometimes I take care of the neighbor kids. I have created a life out of a variety of different pursuits. Mm-hmm. So I'd say probably, like, if you're thinking about in the traditional sense of a career, I'm more of a visual artist and a visual arts project manager.
Mm-hmm. But all those things seem to be, except for the neighbor kids, centered around art.
Art, writing, or creative businesses, or creativity in some way.
Creativity. Yeah, that's a better way to say it. Are you published?
Yes. So I've done 3 poetry books, and I guess I'd call it a memoir. The first poetry book I published was called Prairie Wind Winter. It came out in 1992. And then in 2000, Trial by Ordeal was published in the middle of the COVID shutdown, which was, it was time for it to come out. And it was kind of a non-event because we were all shut down. So, I didn't go to very many literary festivals or bookstore readings or those kinds of things. Then in 2001, I published Catatopia, which is kind of a memoir that I did with the neighbor triplets. It was about our COVID shutdown experience. And then last year, my book, 6B Pencils, came out. And that's a poetry book that was published by Whip and Stock.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah.
What was it? Trial by Ordeal? What's that one about?
Trial by Ordeal is an expression that was used in actually medieval Christianity. And it's about helping people be tested to see if they're really a person of faith.
Oh.
And the book is actually about my family and my mother's journey with Lou Gehrig's disease. And I went through a period of time in the early 2000s where my brother died of lupus. 6 months later, then my mother died of ALS. And a lot of the poems that were in Trial by Ordeal are about my family. Mm. Some of them about the illness and some of them just poems about my family.
And what have you recently been diagnosed with?
I have been diagnosed with breast cancer, and I've gone through surgery and radiation, and I'm in ongoing treatment. I'll be in treatment for 7 more years, which seems like a really long time. They kind of deal with cancer differently now than they used to. They used to do surgery and radiation and then just leave you alone. And now I'm on a protocol where I go in very regularly and they check my blood and they scan and they do things. And the goal is to catch it really early if it comes back. And I take some kind of not very much fun medication that makes my joints hurt.
Oh, yeah.
Which is just part of the deal.
You had a little thing going on Facebook called
Pinky the Lab Mouse.
And just kind of what you were going through, having been poked and prodded and stuff. Is that right? Is that what that was about?
So Pinky the Lab Mouse was an ongoing kind of series of Facebook posts. And it's now about 190 something pages of a not yet finished memoir. And one of my dream stories is that I'm going to actually get my butt in a chair and get back to work on that. It was really hard because I wrote it all when I was in a really important part of the cancer process.
Yeah.
And then when I started to go back and do revisions and try to take all of that and put it into something that someone would want to read, I realized that a lot of it's really cranky and gloomy and nobody's going to want to read this book, right? So now I'm trying to write segments that might intersperse with the cancer stories that are more, for lack of a better word, uplifting or life affirming in some way.
Yeah, it's hard when you're going through it.
Oh, yeah. And nobody really wants to hear all the bad things that are happening to you.
That's true.
Although I hope that people learn things from the things that we can share of those experiences that might be helpful to them. I think it's a very difficult thing to have cancer.
Mm-hmm.
I think many people, when you talk about having cancer, they are kind of convinced you're going to die
Yes.
in the next few minutes.
No, I think you're right.
There's also a part of this, which I don't know if this is true, but I also saw through my cancer treatment and that experience, some people who have an empathetic and concerned and in some ways generous personality, they were like, here, let me help you. I will set up a GoFundMe and I will bring you meals while you're having your treatment and I will come and clean your bathtub because you can't bend over. There were those people who were very generous and very helpful and had that kind of personality. There were some people who were cancer survivors who didn't want necessarily to come into my personal life, but offered advice or solace or encouragement. I know a woman who's a breast cancer survivor who had her surgery 22 years ago. And while I was going through the first part of my treatment, she would call me frequently and would just say, hey, how you doing? And then there's some people who I think it scared them and I haven't seen them again.
Yeah. Are you surprised about that? Because I am so surprised about that myself.
I'm not in some ways because I watched my mom about 10 years before I had my cancer go through having Lou Gehrig's disease, which is a debilitating disease. And most people who have it don't live longer than a couple years.
Right.
And she had a lot of friends who just kind of disappeared. I also think that she really pulled in from being social because she didn't have the energy to be the instigator of things. And I've seen that with myself, right? Not meeting as many people for coffee or not having people over to the house or whatever. I mean, I'm doing really well right now, but I didn't have the energy that I did before I had cancer. I also, now that I'm better, I'm not as afraid of getting sick. But for quite a long time, I was like, I already am in a compromised position. I don't want to go out into a big group of people.
Right.
So I pulled back from going to big art events and activities like that because I didn't want to get sick.
Well, and now that you say it, I did the same thing. I didn't even want my kids to come because I didn't feel like I could pretend I was feeling okay because I wasn't.
Right.
I definitely pulled away also. I'm probably guilty of it as well. I wish we had a norm of how to talk to people who are going through these things instead of pulling away, because it's very lonely already.
And for me, I had the opportunity, once I was fairly far into the process, to go to a cancer support group and go to counseling. I wished that I had had my cancer support counselor in the first 3 weeks rather than after I was starting into my post-surgical treatment, because it would have been very helpful to me in the decision-making processes about what treatment to seek. And for me, the worst part of it was at the very beginning.
Same.
Because I hadn't had a severe illness. I would have broken bones, but nothing like this. I had to figure out how to navigate not only the cancer, which was really not fun, but then also all the things, the insurance portal and the portal at Cancer Care, the computer stuff, figuring out how to manage all the applications for payment for things. And I felt like the bureaucratic part of it was almost worse than the cancer. It drove me crazy.
For me, advocating for myself was so hard. I was not heard. I mean, I really had to fight a fight that I hadn't expected.
I had a post-surgical infection and the abscess blows up. It's like really bad abscess. And so I called the surgeon's office and the surgeon is in Hawaii on vacation. So the gal in the office has me take a photograph of my breast with my cell phone and send it to the consulting physician who is stepping in for her. And then she calls back and she said, I'm going to call in a prescription for antibiotics. And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? Because I have this huge hole in my chest and I'm bleeding and I have all this pus. She says, well, just go to Kmart or go to Walmart and get a box of the biggest, heaviest sanitary napkins and some surgical tape and just put it over your breast so you don't get pus on your clothes. And so I went to get my prescription and then I went to Target and I came home and I took a shower and I trussed myself up with this big sanitary napkin on my chest. And I went back to bed and I was like, okay, so I have this really high fever and I have this infection. And so I called my neighbor and I said, if I don't call you in 10 hours, I said, I want you to come over here with the spare key and make sure I'm okay. If you don't hear from me between now and then, I said, I want you to come look for me. And I didn't die, but it was not very reassuring.
What do you think about art shows in general?
I've done 17 one-person shows and a whole bunch of group shows since 2015. Like that's 10 years, right? Sometimes it goes great.
Mm-hmm. In terms of not necessarily money, but people being there, or it goes great in terms of finances?
I would say it rarely goes as well as I want it to for finances, although I do have shows where I sell work and sometimes I sell quite a bit of work.
Yeah.
There's the whole kind of like, why are you doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Sometimes I do a show like the show I did at Entropy, which was in March. It's kind of a round space. And I made 10 really, really large watercolors that are 10 feet long for that show. And I made them because I thought it would be fun, not because I thought I was going to sell 10-foot long watercolors that would barely fit in anyone's house in Spokane, right?
Yeah.
But that was really fun. Helen Parsons invited me to do it. She handed the gallery over to Rob McCurdy. So he helped me put it up. I worked on it for about, 8 months or something in and around the other things I was doing. We had a terrific turnout, partly because Rob did a good job. And then the spokesman wrote a really nice article about the show. So it was in the Sunday paper and they ran a big picture of like all the way across the front page up in the top and then on the front section of the feature section. So I got great publicity and I went down there the Sunday that it ran in the paper and just hung out with all the people who read about it in the paper, which was really fun.
Yeah.
So that was an example of a show that kind of came together in a good way and people were into it and it was fun. Sometimes it doesn't go very well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of reasons why it might not. Sometimes, I've been in shows where I was working with other artists and we didn't get along very well.
Mm.
Sometimes other artists are competitive with you and there's, not that we're siblings, but there's a little bit of like sibling rivalry between the people in the show. That can be kind of weird. I've also had things where sort of the normal stuff goes wrong, right? The publicity didn't work very well. Or I was in a show a few years ago with Rick Gendreau. This was probably, it was before COVID, so maybe 2017. And it just snowed like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And the roads were not closed, but they were about to close for the reception. And the weather was so bad. I swear to God, it was like 3 of my friends, the people who had to be there because they were unlocking the building and Rick's sister. Right? It's like, and we didn't ever get any momentum because the weather was so bad. And then the streets were bad for a couple of weeks afterwards. That was just kind of a fizzle.
If you never made money at art, would you still do it?
I would say yes. I would also say I don't always make things because I think I'm going to sell them. So there's a lot of times where I make something because I think it's interesting to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would make as much art as I do now because it's part of my income. And, I don't know, if I went back to working in the emergency room like I did when I was 25, I wouldn't have as much time to be doing it. I also think that if I wasn't doing this as a business, I might do more things that are just kind of experimental. Like when I was younger, I designed a lot of my clothes and I tried to figure out ways to take things that I was designing, both to wear them, but also to share them with other people. And what I realized is that my ideas are very eccentric and they're probably not going to go into even the most eccentric fashion environment. But I might do more of that kind of thing, if it wasn't my work. I also think some of the writing is very personal. And you probably know this. If you write a poetry book, most poetry books sell 100 copies or less. So you work on something for years and years, and you finally get done. And all of my books have sold more than 100 copies now. But, it's not like you're getting rich selling poetry books for $9 or $12, right?
Right.
Because you have to split it with the bookstore, But I think I would still be doing that.
I'm told often that I think is a compliment that I'm too direct. Do you get that?
Yes.
I think everybody should be direct. Life would be so much better.
Well, what I would say is direct and kind is one thing. Just blunt can be kind of weird.
But even direct and kind, people still are taken off guard. People can't believe that you're saying exactly what you're thinking.
I get accused of being mean.
Oh, yeah.
Not because I'm mean, but because I'm very specific and direct.
It's actually a kindness, I think, to be direct. And so it's funny how people are taken aback.
There's gendering of language as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think women are taught to soft pedal criticism, and we're encultured to gentle things down. So people are oftentimes surprised when women are so direct.
Mm-hmm.
If, you're some male football coach or something, and you came and said whatever this very direct thing is, people go, he's strong, right? And if I come and say what he might say, they're like, why are you being such a bee?
Right. It's really true. There is a definite.
And there's an expectation of a kind of gentleness or indirect communication that's expected. We get into a lot of problems if we assume that the other person thinks about things in the world the way we do.
Right. That's very true. Yeah, that's a good point.
No matter whether you're an artist or whatever you are, we all come to our experience with our knowledge of what we're making or doing for someone. But we also have all the other stuff, family background and the culture we were raised in. And it's very obvious when you are in any kind of intercultural work that certain cultures are very, I guess I would say, loud or brazen or very direct, and other cultures are almost apologetic when they're asking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of it's just that we don't function in the same way.
Do you have a big dream?
I don't know if I have like a really, really big dream. Like I used to joke that I wanted to be in the Venice Biennale, which is an art show in Venice. I don't think I'm going to ever be in the Venice Biennale, but I do want to keep pushing my artwork into places where it hasn't been. I feel like there's only so many places to show here in Eastern Washington. So I have been trying to do shows or get involved in some things that are further afield.
Mm.
I want to finish my book, which will probably take me another couple of years at the speed I'm going. I want to do more traveling to places that I'm curious about.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I think about a lot, because I know partly because of age and partly because of my health, I really want to set myself up so that as things change and I age and I fade out, that I'm prepared for that. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about, where do I want to live? At some point, I'm going to get to the point where I can't live in my house with all my stairs, right? Am I moving across town? Am I moving to another country? Do I want to go back to where I grew up? Where do I want to live? And how do I want to live? I have mostly, as an adult, lived alone. I never lived in a sorority house or a dormitory. I lived with other people, like when I worked for the Girl Scouts. I worked for the Girl Scouts in Colorado for a while. I lived in a tent with 3 other women. And I've lived on a sailboat with someone. But generally, I don't like people that much. I mean, I don't dislike people, but I need a lot of quiet. And I need time on my own to think and process my world and my emotions. So I don't think I'm a retirement home person.
According to Facebook, we became Facebook friends 11 years today. And 5 years ago, or almost 6 years ago, I started photography. And so about that time, I photographed you. The point of that conversation is I knew you for 6 years in between there. before I photographed you about. And I never noticed your hand before.
Oh, interesting.
Until I photographed you and you mentioned it even. You said something about it and then I noticed it. So I just wondered, can you tell the audience what about your hand?
I was born with a birth defect, which affects my right hand, the length of my right arm, and the length of my left leg, and my heart valves in my heart. And it's not really clear why I have it. It is a birth defect. It's not from an accident or something. I've had it since I was born. I think it's probably inherited because I had one cousin who also had short fingers on his left hand, although he didn't have all the other things that I have. And to be honest with you, it's a thing that I've dealt with for my whole life. And in many ways, I have a pretty normal life. But there's a lot of things that I can't do that are two-handed tasks. And I don't know, it's just a thing.
Yeah.
And as I've gotten older, there's other, probably like everyone, there's other things. If you don't use one side of your body very much, the other side of your body gets really overused. So I'm not as strong as I was when I was younger because I've overused my right hand, particularly. When I went to the doctor about my tendonitis a few years ago, he's like, it's like your right hand is 86 years old. He's like, you've been using this
twice as much
because I type with one hand. I do most things where I have to lift with my right hand.
Yeah.
And I have much better coordination. So most things that would require, a good aim or small motor control things, I do with my right hand. I'm never going to be a saxophone player because I can't cover the keys with my fingers, right? There's certain things like that you just can't do them, right? I mean, mechanically, it's not possible. I'm also careful to not get into situations where I have to carry too much weight. I don't catch balls. And that sounds kind of crazy, but there's no cartilage in my fingers. So if I hit the end of my hand with like a volleyball or something, it hits the finger. And then it's like when you jam your elbow on a table, that crazy bone thing. So I have to be careful to not hit my hand on something.
Yeah.
And I have to be careful to not get baited into doing something where I'm dealing with somebody who doesn't have any awareness of what that would be.
Right. A lot of people are scared to pursue their dreams. And despite things that could stand in the way of pursuing your dreams, you haven't let that stop you.
I don't think I have, although I think there's some things I might have done differently if I hadn't had my hand. Like when I was a younger woman and I was thinking about whether or not I wanted to have children, I went to a physician who deals with genetics and looking at the transmission of genetically transmitted birth defects and those kinds of things. And she basically advised me to not have children because many people who have genetic birth defects that affect things like their hand and their heart oftentimes end up having a child that has a much more serious problem than you might have. And, my mom had a couple miscarriages. There were issues. I think that it's possible everything would be fine. I think it's also, my brother was fine. He didn't have any birth defects. He was a smart aleck, but he didn't have any birth defects. If you have a birth defect or you have some kind of developmental disability or something, you might want to think about like how that might be manifest and what you would end up dealing with. There's also different kinds of developmental issues, right? I mean, there's people who have cognitive developmental issues, which would be, maybe somebody who has like Down syndrome or something like that. And then there are people who have developmental issues around things like with my hand. A lot of people who have hand and heart deformities oftentimes also end up with cleft palate and other things that happen during that same time period in the womb because those things are developing at the same time. And to be honest with you, I don't know enough about that to be super scientific about it, but I do think it is a thing to pay attention to. if you have a pretty high risk of having a child that might have a disability, you need to be in a relationship with somebody who would be good at doing that too, because it's not everybody's thing.
Do you have a preference, or do you even think of yourself as disabled or other abled?
So I would say when I was younger, I didn't think of myself as disabled.
Mm-hmm.
I would say now, as a mid-60s woman, I think of myself as disabled, but partly because I've had all these other things, because I got hit by a car going 35 miles an hour, and I have previously broken both of my legs and have damaged my back. And so I have the birth defect, but then I just have a lot of consequences from previous accidents and injuries. And there are a lot of things that I can't do that I could have done as a younger woman. I've never done anything like applied for disability. Probably I would qualify for disability at this point. If I decided I wanted to get disability as part of my income, I probably could do that. I don't really feel the necessity to do that. I feel like I'm not so bad off that I need it, and my skills are good. And so, I just keep going. There's this idea that people talk about people being woke, right? Which in contemporary life, calling someone woke, I guess, is supposed to be insulting. But then if you look at what the root word is for someone to be woke, is also to be awakened.
I just wrote that on Facebook. That was my exact sentence. How can woke be a negative thing if it means you're awake to other people and what they're going through? That's what I think it means. I don't know how that's a negative.
So an awakening could be being aware of others, but an awakening is also kind of like an epiphany, right? You have an awakening, you have an insight or a change of mind. And if you are awakened to an idea, hopefully full of new information, new inspiration, maybe you have a realization that changes how you think. I don't think that's a bad thing.
It's just a fascinating world we live in, that is a negative to some people.
What it really boils down to is the people who want to use that language are not necessarily wanting to recognize other people's points of view.
100%.
So they're in some ways using it in the reverse way that we're thinking about it, right?
It's very stressful and frustrating, and I need a drink and I don't drink. I need a pill or to go to an island.
Or maybe you need to journal.
Oh, yes. Oh, I should
journal. There's probably some good little poems or letters to the editor in there somewhere.
100% I should journal. And I say that a lot and don't do it. So that's a thing. I got to work on that. Do you know what you want your legacy to be?
Oh my goodness, my legacy. That's an interesting question. You probably know this. There's this award that's named after me, the Karen Mobley Arts Impact Award, which I find somewhat ironic because I'm still alive. And it's given out every year by Spokane Arts, and it recognizes me, but it also recognizes artists or writers or volunteers or others in the community for making an impact on the arts community in Spokane. And I mean, I'm not going to build Mount Rushmore or something like that. But what I hope is that this whole generation of artists and actors and writers and community volunteers and arts administrators who are younger than me feel like they were supported and loved and nurtured, and that the work that I did before them and alongside them helped them to create the community that we're building together. That's what I really hope for.
I love that.
And probably it's okay if nobody actually knows I did what I did when it's all said and done. Because what makes the difference really is not that it's about me, but it's about the others, right? And enabling other people to be successful.
I mean, is that what you hope, or is that what you think?
I think it's happening right now.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, not everybody likes me or thinks I'm supportive of them, but I think I'm making a difference with a lot of those younger people. You know, people call me up when they have their troubles and ask for advice, and there's some real advantages to still being around. And a lot of times people call me up and ask me about things that I wouldn't expect.
Lots of great things.
Yeah, it's a cool thing.
for listening. New episodes drop every Thursday.